23 players were traded since October 1st. None more crazy than Sauce Gardner. He just signed a record-setting extension this past summer. And it is incredibly rare, not only for a young superstar to get traded, but right after your deal, essentially halfway through a season. Welcome to a special NFL trade deadline episode of the Schultz Report, presented by Fanatics Sportsbook. I'm your host, NFL insider Jordan Schultz. We have a lot to talk about, as this was the second most active deadline since 1990. A ton of trades, a ton of massive trades that shook up X, that shook up Instagram, TikTok. Your phones must have been buzzing. We're going to get right into it right now. Let's go. Other sports books just don't hit right, but Fan Cash makes switching to Fanatics Sportsbook easy. Only Fanatics gives you up to 10% back on all bets. Win or lose, you can use your Fan Cash to unlock the world of Fanatics, from more bets to tickets to memorabilia and one-of-a-kind experiences that only Fanatics can offer. Don't leave rewards on the table this football season. Switch to Fanatics Sportsbook and let the Fan Cash roll in. Winning hits different here. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Connecticut, call 888-789-7777. Massachusetts, call 800-327-5050. New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY. Maryland, visit mdgamblinghelp.org. Not available in all states. Terms apply. See Fanatics Sportsbook app. All in all, 23 players were traded since October 1st. None more crazy than Sauce Gardner, the Jets' all-pro corner who was dealt to the Indianapolis Colts for 2 first-round picks. That is a lion's share to give up. And the reason is because Sauce Gardner is a dominant lockdown guy. But how did this come about? That's what I'm going to tell you. So the last few days, the Colts have been aggressively pursuing Sauce Gardner. Now, there were others in line as well, and those teams ultimately did not come with as strong an offer as the Colts. But it's my understanding that as many as 2 other teams were also in on Sauce Gardner. And the reason that's so significant is because he just signed a record-setting extension this past summer. And it is incredibly rare, not only for a young superstar to get traded, but right after your deal, essentially halfway through a season. The Colts' pursuit of Sauce Gardner really intensified the last 48 hours. It was very clear that they were going to make a move and wanted to make a move for a big-time corner. They looked at a few others. They looked at Alontae Taylor from the Saints. There were others potentially that they could have gone after, but the opportunity to get Sauce was simply too enticing. And I think it's a massive vote of confidence in Daniel Jones. I think it's a huge vote of confidence in Shane Steichen as well. The GM, Chris Ballard, having the opportunity and the confidence from his owner to go out and make this move. But it is extraordinarily rare to see a player of this caliber traded, especially in the first year of his contract. And the Colts were incredibly aggressive. And ultimately, 2 first-round picks got the deal done. I think realistically, too, you saw against Pittsburgh that the secondary still needed one more playmaker. They get that in Sauce. And now at 7-2, adding Sauce, I think the Colts put themselves in a terrific position to try and go contend for a Super Bowl. So big ups to the Colts. And then if you're the Jets, you realize for the first time probably that you are not 1, 2, or 3 players away, but you are a ton of players away. And so now you get a ton of draft capital. You have the most 1s and 2s moving forward the next 2 seasons, not to mention a slew of other picks. But the Jets have now given themselves an opportunity, along with the Quinnen Williams trade, which we'll explain as well, to really build toward the future and ultimately acquire elite talent in the draft. One more piece I'd be remiss if I didn't mention. The Jets get A.D. Mitchell, former second-round pick of the Colts, wide receiver, who was really in the doghouse for a mistake he made earlier in the season. But this is a talented receiver, was a big-time star at Texas. And the Jets have high hopes for him. So not to be lost, oftentimes you see like a player to be named later. This is not one of those situations. I think the Jets are very excited to get Adonai Mitchell from Indianapolis in the Sauce deal. The other big move that the Jets made, Quinnen Williams, their all-pro defensive tackle. Now, quietly, he had made it very clear to the front office he did not want to be a Jet anymore. And I think the front office was going to do right by him as long as they got the asking price in return, which they did. They got a future 1, they got a 2, and they got Mozzie Smith back. But absolutely, Quinnen Williams wanted a fresh start to play on a contending team, or at least to play relevant football, which, say what you want about Dallas, they're going to be relevant for the second half of the season. And I think the Jets clearly get their haul back as a result. Just purely from a fan perspective, I am really curious to see what Aaron Glenn's defense looks like the second half of the season. Not only do you lose Sauce and All-Pro, you lose Quinnen and All-Pro, and you lose Michael Carter, a really good starting nickel. So if you're a defensive coach, Aaron Glenn, now it's on you to scheme it up, because you just traded away 3 of the very best. I think if we rewind the clocks back to August, when Micah Parsons was traded, I don't think Cowboy fans would have ever signed up for the trade. But if they knew they were getting Quinnen Williams halfway through the season, which, by the way, Jerry Jones didn't know until a couple days ago. But if they knew that, I think some of them would have at least been a little more amenable to it, because Quinnen Williams is a massive difference maker. He's as good as it gets from the defensive tackle position. It fills a need. He's not a pass rusher, but he can still play the pass some. And ultimately, that's why you got those draft picks from Micah Parsons. You want to go out and get elite players. At some point, you got to pull the trigger and use some of that draft capital. Not all of it, but some of it. And that's what Jerry Jones did. Another huge name that could have been dealt was Breece Hall. Now, he was not dealt because the Jets did not get the draft capital they were seeking. I think a third-round pick would have got it done. They did not get that, and hopefully you saw my report about an hour or so before the deadline that Breece Hall, quote, wants to be out. I think he clearly saw the writing on the wall with not only Quinnen and Sauce traded, but Michael Carter traded earlier, and the fact that this is a Jets team that is clearly in rebuilding mode. It is absolutely worth noting that Breece Hall is averaging 5 yards per carry. He will be a free agent after the season. You also have Jermaine Johnson and you have Quincy Williams, 2 other huge names that the Jets were entertaining calls on, but did not get the draft capital they were seeking. So Jermaine Johnson, Quincy Williams, Breece Hall stay. Michael Carter, obviously, Sauce Gardner, and Quinnen Williams on their way out. A monster day in Florham Park. Another big move that almost got swept under the rug because there was so much late action, but Jakobi Meyers, very good wide receiver from the Raiders, gets traded to the Jaguars. Now, here's what you need to know. Before the season, Meyers requested a trade. The Raiders obviously have stumbled to a 2-6 start. He has been very clear and adamant that he wanted to be traded. The Jaguars, as soon as that trade request came in the preseason, they reached out to the Raiders. They were told, we will not trade Jakobi Meyers at this point unless you essentially blow us away. They did not. And then everyone else subsequently these last couple weeks was told, yes, Jakobi Meyers is available for a third-round pick. I think the writing was on the wall for the Raiders. They saw they were not going to get a third-round pick. So what did they do? They got a fourth and a sixth, there's my math, from the Jaguars, who very much wanted to add another wide receiver. One of the cool side notes here, too, is that the Jaguars played the Raiders this weekend. Jags won. But sometimes it takes that face-to-face communication for a trade to materialize. And that was obviously discussed before the game. They play the game, and then now a deal is done. 4th round, 6th round picks back to Las Vegas in exchange for Meyers. And Jacksonville's thought process here was very simple. We need one more really reliable pass catcher. Travis Hunter is currently injured. The ACL is intact, but he's going to miss time. He's going to miss a few weeks. Brian Thomas just got injured. There is absolutely a need to add one more wide receiver, a professional. That's what you get in Jakobi Meyers. He's a free agent after the season as well. He'll be very motivated. He's in great shape. Love the move for the Jaguars. And here's the thing. If you're the Jags, you're 5-3. You want to make a run, but you know that you're going to have to score points and be consistent offensively. Jakobi Meyers will solve a lot of the third down problems that the Jaguars have had. I think he'll absolutely fit for Liam Cohen, the head coach. He'll fit for Trevor Lawrence. He will provide a safety valve for this offense. And don't forget either, the Jaguars will get back Brenton Strange, their young standout tight end who was having a terrific season. They'll get him back shortly as well, along with Hunter. So Jacksonville adds another pass catcher. They're going to need to score points in the AFC. This will help them in a big way. One of the teams we told you was in on everything, the Philadelphia Eagles, and they proved us right. Michael Carter, Jair Alexander, and the biggest ticket item financially, Jaelan Phillips, a terrific young pass rusher who is also set to become a free agent. And one of the valuable components about getting a free agent to be is that he's going to be motivated. Now, eventually, you're going to have to make a decision whether or not to pay him. And I think Miami, on the flip side, realized that this might not be a fire sale, but we are not contending this season. We need to acquire draft capital. We have an interim GM. Who knows what's going to happen with Mike McDaniel? Obviously, we believe he's going to stick throughout the rest of the season, but you need to acquire more picks. They do that with Jaelan Phillips. And if you're the Eagles, this was really the one position of need. You know, you have a really good secondary. You obviously added Carter to that. Good backers, really good interior defensive line with Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, but you needed one more pass rusher. You get that now with Jaelan Phillips, who's kind of got that speed power combo. I really like the fit. When you're in on everyone, you're calling everyone. That's what Howie Roseman, the GM of the Eagles, does. He was incredibly active on the phone lines. There were quite a number of players that he explored, especially at pass rush. But ultimately, he really swung for the fences, which is no surprise. That's what the Eagles have done traditionally. That's what they do with Jaelan Phillips. And I got to tell you, I really like the move. Another team that made a splash, albeit maybe quietly, the Seattle Seahawks getting Rashid Shaheed. Now, we had told you he was likely to be traded. There were also talks about Brandon Cooks, but nobody really wanted to take on that money. And then obviously Chris Olave, even though he hasn't had extension talks, New Orleans did not want to move him. They ended up moving Rashid Shaheed, former undrafted free agent, but one of the premier down-the-field weapons. It's a really good move for Seattle, and it makes a lot of sense because Cooper Kupp has been in and out of the lineup. You think you have a potentially budding star in Torrey Horton, but he's a rookie, and obviously you have the league's leading pass catcher in JSN, but get one more super downfield speed guy in Rashid Shaheed. That's exactly what he is. Not to mention you reconnect him with Clint Kubiak, the offensive coordinator in Seattle, who was with him in New Orleans, so some synergy there. Another pass catcher for Sam Darnold. Seattle, by the way, explored a number of moves, potentially looking at pass rush. They also were considering trading Rick Woolen and Boye Mafe, corner and defensive linemen, really good players. But they held put, they held firm, they were patient, and they got their guy ultimately in Rashid Shaheed. The three teams who I was surprised, honestly, that did not make a move, especially at wide receiver, Denver, Pittsburgh, Buffalo. All three were in on different wide receivers. Denver, I think, would have really liked to have added Jalen Waddle. They monitored him. A lot of teams were monitoring Jalen Waddle. But the asking price was enormous from Miami. And even though Waddle's contract is reasonable in the mid-20s, Denver and really nobody else wanted to pull the trigger on a Jalen Waddle move. Rashid Shaheed, I know Buffalo liked him as a downfield threat for Josh Allen. Pittsburgh was in until the end with Jakobi Meyers. But ultimately, all three stand put, don't make a move. And now we just have to wait and see for the second half of the season. The one massive move that wasn't made that I thought had a legit shot of happening was Trey Hendrickson. It was my understanding that they had lowered their asking price, but ultimately then Quinnen Williams gets a massive haul from the Cowboys to the Jets. And as a result of that, I think Cincinnati then said, okay, if we're going to trade Hendrickson, it needs to be in the vicinity of Quinnen Williams. They were not going to get that for a 30-year-old pass rusher, as great as he is, on an expiring contract. I also still think there is hope internally that the Bengals can make a playoff push, especially if Joe Flacco continues to play well and if Joe Burrow continues to be on track for his rehab mid-December. I don't think Cincinnati really ever wanted to trade Hendrickson, but between Indianapolis, Dallas, I thought maybe Seattle could get involved. There were a number of teams that could have pulled the trigger. Ultimately, asking price was too high. Trey Hendrickson, for now, remains a Bengal. So my three big winners from the deadline, no order, Dallas, Philly, Jacksonville. All three got a lot better. All three made monster moves. And if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, no surprise. If you're the Jaguars, you have a regime that comes from the Rams. Obviously, we've seen the Rams make monster moves, Jalen Ramsey, Von Miller, among many others. And if you're the Dallas Cowboys, this is a little bit out of pocket, but we told you Dallas was going to be a buyer at the deadline, especially defensively. They go out and get Logan Wilson. They go out and get Quinnen Williams. So those are my 3 winners for the trade deadline 2025 edition. So where does that leave us in terms of the second half of the season? I think Indianapolis, Jacksonville, Baltimore, all 3 of those teams in the AFC got a lot better, especially the Colts and Jags. In the NFC, I would say Philadelphia, Dallas, Seattle, those 3 teams got better. And it'll be interesting to see now how long it takes for these guys, a Jalen Phillips, a Rashid Shaheed, a Sauce, how long does it take for them to get ingratiated into their respective teams? Because you need to hit the ground running, especially if you're a Dallas with Quinnen Williams, especially if you're a Baltimore with Draymond Jones. You need to hit the ground running. You don't have a lot of room for error, but just a monster trade deadline in every sense of the word, and one that, quite frankly, I was not anticipating being this insane. So that does it, folks. All in all, since October 1st, this trade deadline, 23 players traded, 18 total trades, 21 teams involved, most trades made, Jets 4, Eagles 3, Ravens 3, Browns 3, 8 deadline day trades, tied for the second most on any deadline day since 1990. Wow.